Hi, I'm Susan Pike of Wild Lilac Designs, and I'm going to show you briefly, I hope, how we do our faux distressed signs. So to make it the faux distressed, the fake distressed, we start with two background colors. If you wanted to show light, we start with a dark color. If you wanted to show dark, we start with a light color. So today I'm going to actually start with a light color, which in this case is white. The very first thing I do is hit the outside edges, and I'm not careful about it. So I dip my sponge into the paint, and I do the outside edges just with a real quick swipe. These are the sponges we use for our background. They're the yellow sponges. Well, they're mostly yellow. They started off as yellow, let's put it that way. And we call them our rainbow sponges now because a lot of times you'll see that they are multiple colors. After I do the outside edges, I do the surface of the board, and I'm not careful because remember, we want this to look distressed, and distressed means not perfect, which is great because I don't do perfect. So we are just getting some color on there, enough to cover the raw wood basically. So I'm putting the white on there, not too heavy. In fact, the key to this entire thing is light coats. We want light coats because we want it to dry today. And the light coats means that it will dry quickly enough that we can put the stencil on and finish our project usually in about 2 to 2.5 hours. Okay, now I'm going to go with the second coat. The first one we chose was just white. That's the one that's not going to show all that much. The second coat is the one that's going to show, but I also want to do the outside edges of it. And again, I do not very careful strokes on that outside edge just to give it a little bit of color. And this one is my number 43 brown. There we go. Just give it a little bit. You do want some of that undercoat to show, so it doesn't have to be careful. Don't take a lot of time doing that. All right, then what I like to do when I'm doing this top coat, I put the full side of the sponge in, get it all over my finger, into my paint, and then, there we go, wipe a little bit of it off, and very, very lightly, I like to do a streak down the center. This works for a couple of reasons. It gives you a good feel for the sponge and how much paint you have on your sponge, and it gives you a good starting point because if you need to bring that paint out then, you've done that. Again, go with the grain of the wood as much as you can, and you don't have to finish this completely. You can leave as much of that undercoat showing as you like, or as little of that undercoat showing as you like, totally up to you. So we're gonna put the brown on here, gonna let it dry a little bit, and then what I like to do is either add a little bit more of the white that I already put on there, or I like to throw an extra color or two in just to give it some depth and some texture. You can even borrow your friend's paint. I don't have a friend here with me right now, but you could borrow your friend's paint and throw a couple streaks of whatever color she's using onto your board. So I'm gonna leave that right there. I'm gonna let it dry a tiny bit, and I might throw a little bit more in. Okay, so I'm gonna borrow some color from a friend, pretend I have a friend, okay? So I've used number 1 is my base coat, the white one. 43 is my top coat, and then I'm gonna throw in a little bit of 44, which is sort of a plummy brown. I love this. And just a streak here, a streak there. And I'm using the same sponge as before for this reason. If I get too much on, like right here, I can just flip that sponge back over, throw some more of the brown in there, and then blend that so that it doesn't look like it's too much of one color. Oh, I have a lot of brown on there. Okay, anyway, so a little bit here, a little bit there. Once it dries, you'll see that what it does is it gives some depth, some texture. There we go. Get a little bit of brown on top of that plummy color. All right, now we're gonna let this dry, and I'll show you what it looks like before we put the stencil on. Okay, so we've got our background painted for the most part. I did add a little bit of number 44 in there, that plummy brown. I have been asked, why do I use the glove just on one hand? Well, I get paint all over the one hand that I paint with mostly. Doesn't mean I don't get paint on this hand, which I do, but this is the hand that gets the most paint. What I do with my sponge after I'm done painting, and this is what you'll do too, is you'll just put it into the container of water so it rinses out. All right, after the paint is on there, our 2 base coats, 2 and maybe a little bit extra, we sand. I've got these sanders, you have to go find them. So what we do is we just very, very lightly sand the surface. We don't have to sand the edges because we're only sanding this so the stencil will stick. So we sand a little bit, not a lot, just to smooth it out a tiny bit. We don't want the paint to be getting stuck on any ridges. And then we wipe that down with a cloth, and we are ready for our stencil. So the next step in the stencil process, this is the stencil I've chosen, Choose Joy. This is a 3-piece stencil. It has the white backing, which we will take off for you because it is a little bit tricky, as you can see. Okay, there we go. So we will help peel the stencil for you so that you don't lose any of the inside pieces. So I chose the Choose Joy saying for a couple of reasons. Number 1, I like to choose joy. Number 2, these have nice thick letters and makes for a very, very good example of what I'm doing here right now. All right, so once I've peeled that off, it is very sticky. And we will place this on here for you and then let you decide where exactly you want it. The reason I do that is don't trust my eyes. I always tell people don't trust my eyes. I'm old and I wear bifocals. So I'm gonna put this on here. I'm going to say, you tell me where it's straight, and once you've got that on there straight, you can start pressing down and then take your little burnisher, black tool here, and push that stencil into the wood. Now don't be nice, don't be kind, push hard, because the harder you push, the less chance there will be of paint bleeding under your letters. We don't want bleeding. So we burnish, we burnish, we burnish. After we've burnished in one direction, we flip it over and we burnish in another direction. So do it at a little bit of an angle. If you do it straight up and down, it sounds like nails on a chalkboard, which no one under the age of 18 knows what that is anymore. More like under the age of 25, but anyway. All right, once we've got that burnished down, one of us will come over and help you peel the clear transfer tape off. Now, if any of the pieces, inside pieces of these letters comes up, not a big deal. Hopefully we've burnished it well enough that they won't come up, but if it does, it's not a big deal. We just place them right back down in the design where they belong. All right, once we've got that done, we're ready to start moving into painting the letters. Now, what I like to do is use some paint that's already on the board if we haven't used all of our, on the table, if we haven't used all of it. We do what we call the load and unload process with painting the letters. We use the white sponges, we use the fat butt end of the white sponges, and we do this. We load the paint, and then we unload the paint. You can use a different plate, you can use your friend's hand. No, don't use your friend's hand. You can just go ahead and unload that paint, and then we very, very lightly dab it into our letters. You'll see that the first time we dab it, it doesn't look like we're doing much of anything. The paint is there, but it's not making much of an impact. That's okay. We want it to do that because what we're doing here is building up our layers of paint. So we're building up the layers of paint, and you can choose however many paint colors you want. But keep in mind that when you come to places like this, where it's a little bit of a, they're right next to each other, it will be tricky if you've chosen different colors. I have chosen to use the same color, white, on all of my lettering because I really, really want the letters to pop against the background. And that brings us to contrast. Use contrast. You want contrasting letters so that it really pops against your background. Okay, so I've got my first couple of coats on here, and as you can see, there's still some lines, and you can still see a little bit of the color underneath. So I'm going to give this all at least one more coat, and when you're doing the dabbing, you want to make sure you do it nice and evenly so it gets straight on there. you want to dab lightly because you certainly don't want to be rubbing or squishing it underneath the edges of the letters at all. So doing it nice and neatly, lightly and orderly like this will give you the saturation of the color that you need and keep it from bleeding, hopefully as much as possible. All right, so what I did now is I flipped my board around so that the design is showing in a different direction, and I hit the top parts of the letters and I hit the bottom parts of the letters so that I make sure I've got everything covered, because a lot of times you miss either one or the other, the top part or the bottom part. And then I will do one more coat of the pinky color that I created for the heart. I think that's going to do it right there. And now here's the nice part. You don't really have to wait for the paint to dry. You can just go ahead and pull the stencil. You may get paint on your hand, but you're not going to hurt the paint on the board. So I always just grab it by the upper edge, pull it off. You'll see how not everything is coming up. For example, the insides of the letters are all still there. That's perfectly okay, because we have a little tool that we will use to get the insides of the letters out. So we pull this off. Throw this to the side, and using our little picky tools, we pick out the insides of all the letters. So let me do that really fast, and again with something, a design that's this big. So what you've done is you've thoroughly covered all of the letters with paint, probably 3 or 4 times. You've done it very, very light coat so it doesn't bleed under, and you've chosen a couple of different colors. I wanted to make this video short and sweet, so I pretty much just went with the one color, and that's fine too. Let me just interject right here. If you choose to do a solid color background, that's perfectly okay. You don't have to do the distress, but that's what this video was about. If you do a solid color background, keep in mind that you want to do it probably 2 to 3 coats, but very, very light coats of paint. Here is the finished product. I'll take it outside, put the hanger on the back for you, and then have you sign and date it with the Sharpie that's on your table so that people in years to come can see how talented you were in 2019.